This episode of the Virginia History Podcast is brought to you in part by Robbie Hackney, our newest Patreon subscriber. Please visit patreon.com/VAHispod to see how you too can become a supporter of the podcast. Also, check out the support tab on the website to discover other ways that help keep this effort to tell Virginia's history going.
Carry me back to old Virginia. Carry me back to old Virginia. There's where the cotton.
Virginia is home to many historic locations. Some of those locations are very well known, such as Colonial Williamsburg, Jamestown, and Yorktown, as well as historic homes such as Mount Vernon and Monticello. Those locations draw large crowds every year, fueling Virginia's vibrant tourism industry. But this past year has hit Virginia's history tourism sector very hard. Those most well-known locations report much fewer visitor rates as they shut down or restricted traffic to a minimum. But Virginia isn't just Mount Vernon, Williamsburg, and Civil War battlefields. Each region has her own distinctive flavor, colored by events that only happened in this town or that. To honor those locations, many smaller, local museums opened in order to keep that history alive. The full impact upon such wonderful gems is yet unknown, but early indicators appear bleak. It's always been one of my main goals to illustrate and shed light on these wonderful locations and their stories. Because of the COVID pandemic, that goal has been pushed further into the foreground as a result. So, when the James Madison Museum of Orange reached out to me, I jumped at the opportunity to try something new for this podcast. Namely, go on a tour in order to highlight a wonderful part of Virginia's historic fabric. The James Madison Museum of Orange County Heritage, located in Orange, Virginia, is the first museum that opened in order to honor President James Madison. The museum opened on a special day in American history, July 4th, 1976, the country's bicentennial anniversary, a fitting tribute to the man commonly referred to as the father of the Constitution. Since then, the James Madison Museum has expanded to tell more than just James Madison's story, as Museum Director Bethany Sullivan explained to me as she walked me through the many fascinating exhibits she and her team have created. They boast a plethora of items related to President Madison, the nearby born President Zachary Taylor, historic documents, period-specific clothing, memorabilia, agricultural equipment, early 20th century automobiles, a 1730s patent house, and so much more. Bethany began serving at the museum part-time in 2010, while also working nearby a few days a week at James Madison's Montpelier. In 2013, part-time became full-time, and the board of directors offered her the museum director position in June 2018. Miss Sullivan's touch is evident in all corners of the museum. She has redecorated the James Madison room, adding spectacular information plaques, created a gorgeous Native American exhibit, added a Black History room, and rotates Orange County-specific history in a temporary exhibit room. Join us on this little trip through the James Madison Museum of Orange County Heritage, and when you're done, we both ask that you do two things. First, go to the show notes page for this episode to learn more about the museum, and then plan your trip to this beautiful part of Virginia to see the museum, as well as all that surrounding Orange County has to offer. Well, joining me this evening is a neat guest. We've got a first opportunity here to where we're actually visiting a museum while not being there. Magic of Zoom, I guess, magic of technology. But Bethany Sullivan at the James Madison Museum in Orange County is joining me this evening, and we're looking to highlight and intrigue people to come and visit this museum. So Bethany, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
And you're gonna show me around here a little bit and show me some highlights of the museum, and we'll try to intrigue some visitors here.
All right, a little quick history. The museum is the first in the United States to honor James Madison. We've been open 45 years now. Opened our doors July 4th, 1976. And we're located in the town of Orange, and we're housed in the 1930 Powell Motor Company and Trucking Building. And it's rather unprepossessing on the outside, but we've got about 7,000 square feet of exhibits on the inside, so it's a nice surprise. So I'm going to switch the camera around. All right, so what you're looking at right now is one of the entrances into Mr. Madison's room. This room actually takes Madison's life from his family heritage, birth, education, early involvement in government, leading, of course, into the whole new form of government, into its trials and tribulations, into the War of 1812, through his lifetime. And we also touch a bit on some founding friendships, Jefferson and Madison and Monroe and Madison. And we have some wonderful personal possessions of the Madisons in several different cases. And to make it even more of a Virginia presidential room, we have a case that features the 7 other Virginia-born presidents by artifacts. And we even give Zachary Taylor his own corner with his bed from the White House, his military traveling desk, primarily because he was born here in Orange County and was the second cousin of James Madison. And those are their reading chairs. Madison's is on the right.
Okay.
So go ahead.
You're just right up the road from where Zachary Taylor was born?
Yeah, Taylor, there's been a long-standing debate, but Montebello currently has the Virginia state sign acknowledging that he was born on their property. The Taylor families formerly owned Hare, Forest, and Rose Hill, I think. There is a stone with a marker at Rose Hill that says he was born there in a cabin on that property. But right now, I think Montebello has the claim recognized by the Commonwealth of Virginia.
Sure. So even though it's James Madison Museum of Orange County, and this room that you're showing me does have quite a lot here for James Madison, there is more than just James Madison, as you're gonna highlight here soon.
Oh, well, definitely more than James Madison. He, of course, is our primary focus in our largest exhibit room in the main part of the building. One fun thing I'm going to show you is that we have this kind of big surprise that everybody loves in the back of the building. Now, this would have been the old automotive bay and trucking area. So this is our balcony out here. And we'll go down here and take a walk around. This is our Hall of Agriculture and Transportation. So Madison, Jefferson called him the greatest farmer in the world, but Madison was a farmer. So the agricultural wing is not such an odd thing to have in a museum about James Madison.
Sure.
Price is the one who bought it from Alexander Spotswood's son, Jonathan, from his estate when he passed. However, this house was built in 1733 for Lord Alexander Spotswood. He had a large plot of land, about 165 acres, that he wanted to turn into a tenant farm. And colony law required that he build a structure for people to live in. And that structure was based on the standard log cut of 16 feet by 16 feet. It's kind of hard to see at nighttime. We don't have any illumination in here, really. So, and then you've got the high raftered ceilings. So the house was going to be bulldozed in the 1980s, but instead, the Nixon family donated it to the museum. You'll see a lot of this brickwork done as insulation in some of the Shakespearean homes and later. So it's a pretty tall house.
Yeah.
And the house also, we kept it on this side so people could see a lot of the original work, as well as some of the younger wood that was put in there to replace the rotted wood. And the house itself is surrounded by all kinds of wonderful different conveyances, farm equipment, all kinds of little fun farm odds and ends as well. This piece here is a favorite of a lot of people. It looks like a big jumble, but it's actually one of the first deer harvester reapers, McCormick and Deere, that they did after the harvester wars, International Harvester Company, to stop those guys from fighting each other and damaging their machines.
Right.
So you can see we have all kinds of things: fertilizer, choppers, slaughter choppers, seeders, fertilizer, grains, animal grain, a corn grist mill, a thresher. And we have this wonderful Rockaway carriage.
Oh yeah, look at that.
In gorgeous condition. This was a 1924 Model T touring car owned by Tex Webb, a character in orange back in the day. And this is a 1912 Model T touring car. It's hard to see. Owned by Zeke Thomason of orange. And then we have a wonderful walnut derby car that was made by Johnny Altman back in 1960. And then the fire wheel that was used during the Great Fire of 1908 that took out almost the entire historic district of Orange where the commercial buildings are. A gentleman named Tails Terrell fell asleep smoking in bed and burned down a lot of buildings. But they would take this around to the front yards and they would drop the pump that was attached down here. They would drop it into the wells of the front yards and they ran out of water. There was no water system. They had to send a train from Charlottesville with horses and water and whatnot. It took 24 hours to put the fire out. And this was one of our early volunteer rescue squads that's no longer existing. So it's just like all kinds of just different odds and ends.
Now, with the Spotswood house, did Alexander Spotswood live in that house?
No, this wouldn't even hold his wig collection. It's only 16 feet. It's 16 feet cubed. It was built strictly for tenants to live in. Okay. And when it was first built, it would not have had glass windows. It would have had animal hide or heavy paper to cover the windows in the bad weather. Glass was added later when the Price family got more affluent. Okay. Now he was governor when he was living in that area. Well, no. This would have been after his governorship, but he did come through there on his Knights of the Golden Horseshoe, correct? On Knights of the Golden Horseshoe. Matter of fact, we touch on that up in Mr. Madison's room. Okay. And we'll go back to that at the end to show you that. That's a really cool 1700s racing curricle, which would have been a high perched. And then you have this fabulous old buggy or sulky. So this room, a lot of people really enjoy this room. This dollhouse is of a place that really exists here in Orange. Mount Peliso was built by Paul Verdier, the center section. And then the Hayden family added to it. And then it became a boys' school. It became an officer's quarter for Confederate officers, then a hospital. And it's privately owned, but they have divided it, I believe, into three different townhouses. But it still exists. So let me take you back upstairs here. We'll be up at the top of the balcony. Okay. All kinds of interesting weights down by the lathe. Yeah, the farming equipment's really got me intrigued with my background now in farming. So you'll have to come sometime. Yeah, absolutely. The reaper and the thresher is fascinating. I'd seen one in oh goodness, where is it? McCormick Reapers. Cyrus McCormick's shop down there off of 81. I saw one down there. Well, the story behind that is that there was a gentleman, I wish I was down there, I'd read the sign to you. There was an Englishman who was a bricklayer by trade, but had a farm, and he had a slave named Ben. And they created this reaper to help them bring in crops. Someone told Cyrus about it. He went down, the guy gave it to him, and he improved it and marketed it, and of course, made a fortune on it. Sure, yeah. And so did several other companies, Johnson and Deere and others, which started the whole harvester wars. Remember I mentioned Tex Webb, the owner of the Black Model T, and that he was kind of a character? Yes. Well, up here, Mr. Webb was a postal employee. So he left us this. He had a grocery store that was run out of what is Earl's Glass today. And he gave us his, can't see it too well, his Civil War peg leg. He gave it to us from his collection. Now, I mention him again because there's a wonderful story about a little boy named Tommy Kirby.
Mm-hmm.
And when Tommy was in elementary school, he worked for Mr. Webb. He would take groceries to the ladies in town on his little wagon. And in 1951-ish, he came to work for Mr. Powell over here at Powell Motor. His job was to wash the big rigs. And under the buggy, you can't really see it that well, there's a little square of wood, and that's where the acid wash would go down the drain. Well, he fell in love with those tractor trailers and the rigs, so he carved out of wood the entire 3 fleet. And he used wallpaper for the wheels and smokestacks, straight pins for the antennas. He kept records, and this is about 1/3 of what he carved.
Yeah. Wow. For those who are listening on the podcast here, I'll show some pictures of this on the show notes page. These are really fascinating.
And I can send you some still copies.
Sure.
And these are a whole bunch of marvelous tools and pieces and parts. That is a gas can for the Model T, the 1924, and its batteries.
Okay. Wow.
That's a Civil War hernia truss.
Wow.
And then we have just various different kinds of pulleys, planes, and things like that. Some nice old typewriters, an old mimeograph machine. You put the ink in and you put 1 page at a time and you roll it on through.
Wow.
And this is a traveling actor or vaudevillian trunk. Each of those little drawers would have held costume. The bottom one held makeup, and you had your makeup mirror, and they could stand against a wall. So they weren't as hard to use in a room. They didn't take up as much room as some of the other styles would. And this is one of my favorite pieces. This is a late 1800s into 1928 surveying system.
Oh.
Some beautiful pieces on this.
Yeah. Very well kept.
Yeah, they're beautiful when we got them. We've tried to keep them that way.
Yeah.
So now we're going to go back in the main museum. People love this too. This is a 1880 fireproof safe. It's all hand painted and designed. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, some wonderful middle schooler decided to play with the lock. And I cannot get the interior one open. But it weighs a little over 3,600 pounds. It's cement and steel.
Yeah. Wow. Was there anything in there when the lock was played with?
No, we didn't keep anything in there. There were, however, documents in it from Powell Motor Company back when it was closed down and the safe was left behind. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. We have 2 pieces here. If you've ever been to the Madison wing of the Library of Congress, you've seen the life-size marble of Madison. It was done by Walker Hancock, who was a monuments man from World War II. Mm-hmm. He gifted us this 1/3 life plaster model, as well as the full-size head in Madison's room from his just before he made the marble piece. Mm-hmm. So that's another nice little piece of history to have.
Yeah.
Then we enter the Native American exhibit area.
Mm-hmm.
I really love what Dr. Alan Shotwell did for my walls here. He made it feel like you're walking in the Eastern Virginia woodlands. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And we have a fabulous 1635 map of Virginia. Mm-hmm. And we have a real fun map. Shows you the size of Orange County. The red, Orange County was the red from August 8th of 1734 into 1739, mm-hmm. before they started chopping it up.
Right.
And then we have some artifacts from the Stagara tribe.
Okay. And
then information for people to enjoy. And then we also have our Black History exhibit room, mm-hmm. which I set up and opened in in February of 2015 with 3 themes. Mm-hmm. Your Forgotten Patriots of the American Revolution, including some marvelous sculptures by Ed Dwight. That is the male combatant and the female combatant. Mm-hmm. And then we have post-emancipation, or the challenges The Gilmore cabin is on the grounds of Montpelier.
Mhm.
And then just some wonderful local exhibit pieces. A piece I really like in here is this box.
Mhm.
This box was crafted in 1870 with the passing of the 15th Amendment and used in Barbersville.
Okay.
So that's a neat little piece of history to have.
Yeah, just up the
And
street.
then on the opposite, I beg your pardon?
Just up the street from you there.
Yes.
Yes.
Now this whole wall over here is basically looking at antebellum Orange.
Mhm.
And we have a lot of fabulous artifacts. We all have it set up. I have it set up as looking inside the plantation window, because there was no town of Orange during the Civil War. There was Orange Courthouse and Orange Village. So on this side of the house, you have the owners or the master's side. And on this side of the house, you have the enslaved servant, as they were called. So living together, but separate, and the disparity between them.
Mhm.
And I like to point out to folks, this is period correct clothing. You've got an 1830s apron and dress, a slightly older shawl. But in the house, the servants were dressed far better than they would be to work out in the fields. Because a man's success at that time was judged on the condition of all of his property, his wife, his children, his servants, and his belongings. So this is a really nice look at a lot of fabulous pieces, like the snuff grinder.
Okay.
Yeah. We got a flax comb, and I've got a flax breaker out in the agricultural wing.
Mhm.
This beautiful end table, kitchen end table, was made for Ambrose Madison, Madison's grandfather, by his enslaved carpenter, Benjamin.
Oh, wow.
And just all kinds of wonderful pieces. The chest of drawers was made for James Madison's father by a couple of his enslaved carpenters. And then we have some other pieces over here. So it's a really, I also, in each of these sections, I have a reference section where people can look up additional information if they'd like.
Okay.
And we actually have a bill of sale from the Terrell estate that sold 6 enslaved peoples. And we have an authentic kalimba compared to the American kalimba.
Yeah. Wow.
So you have all these fabulous things in here. And I hope you're not getting dizzy.
No, this is great. This is great.
And so here we have my temporary exhibit room. And for a year, I had the American silk mill. Now I'm into basically fragments of the past. So this is a very eclectic look at stories in Orange. We have political figures and attorneys and your local baseball league. The Orange Horse Show trophy. The Orange Horse Show was a huge national event for decades. It was the creme de la creme of the horse world. And some really old baseball cards and drugstores that used to be here. I just got, this one is ours. It's a sulfate bottle from the Dale gold mine. We had several gold mines in Orange, and it tested the purity of the gold. Then from another mine, this is from the Orange County Historical Society, we have an assay cup and what's left of a pickaxe. So that's here. And then we have some of the silk mill pieces still in here. So this is kind of a band uniform that they stopped using around 1975, 76.
Right.
This is another favorite piece.
Yeah.
This is an 1875 traveling costume on an 1800s wasp waist form. Now, wasp waist was like 14 to 16 inches. Incredibly, ridiculously small and very dangerous, breaking ribs and moving organs. But what makes this costume really interesting is that the bustle is built into the skirt. So when the lady sat down on the train seat or the carriage seat, it would fold up and she wouldn't have to sit on the edge of the seat. So we kind of have a ladies section here. Everybody has their iPad or their cell phone to keep all their electronic notes. So this is the 18th, 17th century memo pad made of ivory.
Wow.
And they would write with pencil and then wipe off the pad. And it's even got the days of the week on it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And in the corner, this is a Flemish revival chair that was sitting in the reception room of the President Madison Inn under the portraits of Dolly and James Madison.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And right here is the newspaper from the Orange County News on the day it opened in 1928.
Oh,
and then I have a bunch of now gone businesses and homes of the past.
so you're really highlighting Orange County, especially right now in this area.
Oh, definitely. It's covering a gamut of things.
Sure. Sure.
We've got a wonderful 1768 Book of Common Prayer,
Mm-hmm.
a fabulous shoehorn, and some typical men's items,
Mm-hmm.
and some wonderful letters and documents from the 1740s into the 1800s.
Mm-hmm.
And this is really neat. In Orange on Main Street is a B&B called Holiday House. Now, this is Waller Lewis Holiday.
Mm-hmm.
And he is the nephew of Dr. Holiday, who purchased that home. Dr. Holiday during the Civil War. We have his amputation kit.
Oh, yeah.
And so that house itself has a fabulous history. So this portrait of his nephew, I had no clue what kind of painting it was because it didn't look like oil. It wasn't watercolor. And I had someone appraise it, and they told me it was called gouache, which basically is watercolor powders ground in water and thickened with a glue-like substance and then painted. But this one was actually painted on a photograph. So that's kind of cool.
Yeah. Yeah, that is really neat.
And then over here, I have a picture of Ernest Terrell.
Mm-hmm.
He is the grandson of Queen and Morton Terrell, which are in the Black History exhibit room. Mr. Terrell had a gas station store, and he had been born a slave and freed in his adult years.
Mm-hmm.
And Ernest was the first African-American in Orange to volunteer for service in World War I. Okay. And then I have the uniform of Private Leonard Wampler from World War I.
Mm-hmm.
Then I move us into World War II. That is an attack ship flag from the invasion of Sicily.
Okay.
And then we have a whole series of books. The first edition of Madison's papers, The Federalist, and some fabulous old books. But one of my favorite books in our collection is called The Preceptor.
Okay.
Preceptor is another word for teacher or educator. Mm-hmm. And this was written by R. Dodsley, and he wrote it for the future King George III. And it has everything he thought a young man would need to be a good leader and a gentleman. And it had mathematics, art, language, history, geography, architecture, astrology, everything you could imagine in it. And the color plates are absolutely stunning.
Yeah.
Fire department. And this is fun. Take a look at that label if you can see it. Can you read it?
For all creation, for man and beast.
For all man and beast. And it still has the broken stopper in it. But I would imagine, since it's a later 1800s turn of the century, it's poisonous by now.
Yeah, right.
And this is not an apothecary kit. This is a gold and gems scale.
Mm-hmm.
So just all kinds of odds and ends in this room.
Yeah, just showing the complexity of Orange, everything that everybody's involved in.
And there were 5 portraits of James Madison in his lifetime.
Mm-hmm.
And we happen to have him, was employed by the government that did a lot of work for the engraving for the Treasury. Mm-hmm. So he was traveling around the country, interviewing what he said were the notable Americans and writing their biographies. So that's the portrait he did of Madison in 1833.
Okay.
And this is that full-size head I mentioned that Walker Hancock gave us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So we're obviously back in Mr. Madison's room at this point.
Sure.
Now, Zachary Taylor, I said we are going to come, not Zachary Taylor, Spotswood. We were going to come back to him.
Yes.
This portrait was considered the missing portrait of the Payne-Limner series.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Payne is the family. Limner is what they call an untrained, unknown American artist. So you have very much the American look versus the European style of painting.
Sure.
So what makes Anne so interesting is her lineage.
Mm-hmm.
On her mama's side, there are a lot of ducal crests, but her great-grandfather was Lord Alexander Spotswood.
Yeah.
So she is a descendant of King Richard of Scotland.
Mm.
Her aunt Dorothea was the second wife of Patrick Henry.
Mm-hmm.
Patrick Henry was a cousin of, drumroll, da 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 da, Dolly Madison.
Oh, wow. There's another connection.
So aristocratic, wealthy people who were all linked together.
Right.
So what made her portrait beyond that was when I first started here, half of her face was missing. She had tears, filthy, barely fitting in her frame anymore.
Mm-hmm.
But I knew that at the Virginia Museum of Fine Arts, in their colonial arts room, they have her sibling painting, Lord Spotswood playing in the yard with his dog.
Mm-hmm.
DeWitt Wallace in Williamsburg had on exhibit several other family members, her sisters primarily.
Mm-hmm.
So when they learned, when I took it down there for them to look at, they paved the way for acceptance of this portrait to be completely cleaned, repaired, and conserved by the Master Art Restoration Program at Winterthur, University of Delaware.
Yeah.
So she's kind of a really neat picture to have.
Yeah, it's clean and beautiful, no doubt. They did a great job. They did a great job.
So that pretty much walks you around. It doesn't tell you about everything. We have a lot of fascinating documents. We mentioned those 7 Virginia presidents.
Yes.
We have some treats over here. Washington gets a whole shelf to himself.
Right.
Here's a wonderful period. He's the number one guy. So that's a period lithograph of his trip over the bridge at Trenton. And evidently the ladies just, feted him and everything else and celebrated because it was an important point in the American Revolution. Mm-hmm. But over here we had something I actually took to Fred Smith Library at Mount Vernon because I didn't believe it was his.
Okay.
You always see that gigantic GW when you see his signature.
Mm-hmm.
Well, this one, and I can't see how to bring you closer to it. This one just has a very neat Washington in beautiful script at the bottom.
Right.
So I took it to Fred Smith Library, and they said, yes, that is his. When he was a surveyor, he really tried to write beautiful, neat script. But as time went on and he went into the army, he kind of gave that up.
Right.
But it is actually a what they called a survey of waste and ungranted land in Frederick County. Okay. And that he had done this for his half-brother, Augustine. And I believe the date is 1750. So 1750. Okay. Now, down here, we go on to Thomas Jefferson. Oh, yeah. This is one of Jefferson's chocolate mugs in saucer. And then for Monroe, we actually have a reproduction of Marie Antoinette's china. It's a reproduction that he purchased in 1780. Oh, okay. So it's an old reproduction. Very colorful. It is beautiful. I love the gilt work. And I mean, that is what you would picture Marie Antoinette using. Sure. And then we have Monroe's private punch bowl before he became president. Mm-hmm. What you see on there is his wife and his 2 daughters in the rosebuds, and the stylistic eagle that he ended up using as president. Okay. But this is one of the first attempts of putting lithograph on hard paste porcelain. Mm-hmm. And here we have William Henry Harrison. Mm-hmm. And we have Tyler. And here's Zachary again.
Yes.
That's a snuff box for when he was running for president. And then we have Wilson, several pieces for Wilson. So we have all 8 Virginia-born presidents represented in this room.
Yeah, that's great. So it's definitely, even though it's got the James Madison name, it's got so much more. I mean, this section here where you're at with James Madison is wonderful. It's set up really well here, showing his life, and then everything else that you bring in. But it's a great museum, highlighting, as I said here, more than just Madison, so much more than just Madison, showing the area, and then agriculture and slave life and Native American life and such. I think it's very well put together.
And we do not shy away. Thank you. We do not shy away from the issue of slavery with Mr. Madison.
Right.
We have an educational panel that we share, but I want to give you a couple fun things.
Okay.
Up at the front of the room, we have several quotations.
Mm-hmm.
But up here, I don't know if you remember how much John Adams, well, he and Jefferson had a horrible falling out, and then he really attacked Madison a lot. But at the end of his life, perspective, and he reconnected with Jefferson. And he wrote this fabulous quote here: "Notwithstanding 1,000 faults and blunders, his," meaning Madison, "administration has acquired more glory and established more union than all his 3 predecessors, Washington, Adams, and Jefferson put together." That was in April of 1817. And then we'll go to something that's not as loving. In the War of 1812, you heard of the Hartford Convention?
Yes.
Governor Otis Harrison Otis. He was one of those that really was filled with vitriol about Madison. And there were some acts of treason going on, and Madison could very well have taken some people up on charges, but he didn't. But he was not above getting even where he could. So in order to succeed as a congressman or in political society, you have to go to events, right? You have to be there.
Right.
So this is from a letter that Congressman Otis wrote to his wife. "We have received no invitation from Madison. What a mean and contemptible little blackguard." Wow. So lots of great information about Madison in this room. But you are right. There's so much more here than Madison. And this is another piece I really love. This came from the bicentennial of the Constitution. And I just thought it was appropriate having it here where the Constitution is tested, and Madison's linked to that.
Especially given the date that you said you opened the museum. That was July 4th, 1976. Yeah.
1976. And that's how we got the phone number 672-1776.
Yeah, that's great. It really is. Well, Bethany, this has been wonderful.
Well, thank you. I've enjoyed it.
Yeah, it's definitely making me want to go, no doubt. Seeing some other things here and spend some time looking at everything else. And I know you did a quick highlight tour, so certainly didn't see everything, but saw so much. And I hope my listeners and anyone listening to this certainly visit the show notes page. We'll Bethany and I will work together to put some stuff up there. Different information, time, hours, directions, things like that, and a few other pictures and such to highlight even more of what Bethany was talking about tonight. Bethany, is there anything else you'd like to add about the museum?
Well, every year we have one major fundraiser in October, and think of the Antiques Roadshow.
Okay.
We do an appraisal fair here. This year's will be Saturday, October 16th. We will have 3 appraisers. It will be half-hour appointments, and that's posted on our Facebook page. It's also posted on our brand new redesigned website, thejamesmadisonmuseum.net. And if you go to James Madison Museum at onsale.com, you'll get our just finished virtual walking tour of the historic District of Orange.
Okay. Okay. I'll definitely put links to all of that on the show notes page. Be a jam-packed show notes page this time around. It'd be great.
Well,
So,
I appreciate it very much.
yeah, and
And anybody who wishes to become a member, it's very easy. We are obviously been affected like everybody else has from the COVID fallout. But we do welcome, when the time is right for each person, volunteers. We need help here. Oh, big news.
okay.
We are going to be the Orange County location for the Charters of Freedom setting. So
Okay.
if you go to foundationforward.com or freedom.com, you'll see it.
Mhm.
Basically, it's like going to the National Archives. You have life-size reproductions in bronze of the Declaration, 4 pages of the Constitution, and Bill of Rights. So that is going to be happening later this year.
Okay, great. Yeah, I'll put all that information on there. And Bethany, you did mention it, and this is one of the big reasons why we had connected. Is COVID has really hit the history industry. If we're saying that in Virginia, it definitely has countrywide. But, definitely anything we can do to help, highlight your museum and such like that, we'll do. And I appreciate you opening up the museum here for me through your iPhone. It's been wonderful. It's the next best thing, right? I'm getting a personal tour by the director.
Well, the
it.
director, there are only 2 employees here, and I'm here 5 days a week.
Right.
Well, thank you for giving me the opportunity. I really do appreciate it.
Absolutely, and thank you again. We'll
have a good night.
You as well. Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you for tuning into the Virginia History Podcast. Your support is continuing to keep this colony growing. Please consider supporting us financially by first visiting our Patreon campaign at patreon.com/VAHISPod. I also have a donation button set up on the website's support tab, as well as 2 online stores selling Virginia History Podcast merchandise that can be found under the same support tab on the website. Visit often, as we're working to add more goodies to each store. You can also help us tell Virginia's history in a few non-financial ways as well. Start by subscribing to us on your favorite podcast app, and please take a few moments to leave us a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts. Doing so helps bring exposure in the podcast network. Then follow the podcast website at www.vahistorypodcast.com for show notes on each episode. And also look for us on social media. We're on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. And finally, tune in again next time as we continue walking through Virginia's rich history.
Mas